Hello, and welcome to FloridaMan40k. We are back on an actually regularly scheduled interval this time. I know we talked last week about how we were going to discuss ITC missions and secondaries this week, but there was a little bit of a change in plans. We were listening to Chapter Tactics this morning, and we discovered that not only did our great teammate Richard Siegler win the Warzone Atlanta this last weekend, but he also had a talking point about aura maintenance that we really liked. So we decided to pick it up. So I have with me today Jimmy.
Hey.
And the man himself, man of the hour, Richard Siegler.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
And Daniel's here as well, but his connection's a little bit shoddy, so we might be hearing him in and out of the episode. Either way, we've got a pretty good episode lined up. We're going to be talking to Richard, of course, about his recent Warzone Atlanta victory. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to take a pretty deep dive into measuring auras, maintaining them, measuring range, and declaring intent when measuring. And that should be a pretty good episode, I think. You guys excited?
Always excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I do want to jump in real fast. You said at the beginning, we discovered on Chapter Tactics that Siegler won. We knew Siegler won Warzone Atlanta. We discovered the topic of aura management hadn't really been discussed. So that's what we discovered. We are good teammates, and we do pay attention to our teammates winning.
I was being metaphorical. We knew. I was watching the whole time.
Yeah, but you got to be nice to the sweetheart of 40K, the man himself.
Indeed. All right. So first things first, Richard, congratulations on winning Warzone Atlanta, and thank you for coming back on the show. We loved having you last time after you won a different super major, and apparently you thought it was fun too, because here you are again.
I'm my best for the team.
Oh, he's so humble. I do it for personal glory. But he does it better, so maybe I need to change tactics. All right, so first things first, you were running Tau, obviously, because it's you. Was this anything significantly departed from what you have been running? The triple cyclic ion blaster, triple riptide with a bunch of drones. Were there any small changes in there?
I made one small change. I dropped a couple shield drones and added a third Pathfinder team to try and get that third grab drone, just in case I played against a bunch of Raven Guard or White Scars players.
Okay. I don't think that was a problem looking at your schedule, but if it was, it certainly worked out. So we're not going to dive into all 5 games here just because we know that can get repetitive. And I'm sure that not all 5 of your games were very tight and close affairs. If you had to pick one game from the weekend, and you can give a quick shout out to all of your opponents if you want, but definitely want to pick one game, whatever you thought your most challenging match of the weekend was. Kind of want to deep dive into that.
All right. So obviously I had 5 fantastic opponents throughout the weekend. But my round 2 match, I had the great fortune of playing against Nick Nanavati for the very first time. And our game was streamed live on the Pro Tabletop stream. So if you haven't seen that, feel free to check it out. But it was an extremely tight game. I ended up pulling it out 18-16 at the very end. But I'll talk a bit more about specifically what went on and what I was thinking. So it was mission 2, which was a relic mission. 3 relics in the middle of the board, spread out, and the deployment map was Pointy Dawn of War. So initially going in against Nick's list, which is an Iron Hands Brigade, 25 intercessors, 5 sniper scouts. He's got 5 grab devs in a drop pod. He's got a librarian, a smash captain, and a tech marine on bike. And then he's got 3 suppressor units as well as 3 dreadnoughts. One is a Redemptor. One is a Relic Contemptor with las cannons, and then he has a Venerable Dreadnought with las cannons and twin autocannon. A lot of efficient firepower. He takes Master of Artisan for that reliability, and then he takes Stealthy so that his whole army counts as in cover all the time. Incredibly efficient list, but it doesn't quite have a lot of anti-infantry firepower or anti-drone firepower outside of the Redemptor and the Thunderfire cannons that he has, 2 of them. So my plan going in was to use the terrain there, these large ruins, to my advantage, and try and hide from the Redemptor as long as possible, so that it was mainly the Thunderfire cannons who were doing damage to the drones, and just try and outlast him. Nick deployed pretty interestingly. He put the bulk of his army in one quarter of his side of Dawn of War, And then he put a single Thunderfire cannon, 5 intercessors, a smash captain, and the tech marine on the other side. And so I was forced with a decision. How exactly do I want to deploy against this? And where do I want to move turn 1? Do I want to try and first sweep over to that side, take out the 4 or 5 units he had there, and then move to the center? Or just go straight to the center and keep the pressure on the whole game? I ended up going with the more conservative play of clearing him off that side and then working towards the middle. One of the key turns was his turn 2. He ended up going first, and in his turn 2, he dropped all of his suppressors and the grav devastators in, and attempted to take out one of my Riptides through just sheer volume and not the best drone saves. He ended up taking a Riptide down exactly the amount of wounds that he needed to. Losing a Riptide on his top of 2 was not great for me, so I felt like I was in a bit of a hole at that point, and I really had to play perfectly to try and salvage the game, I felt. So from there, I took out all the grab devs, some of the suppressors, and then was able to take out his smash captain that turn as well. But he was just continued pounding me with the last Thunderfire cannon he had and the drones. And so by the end of my turn 3 or so, I had barely any drones left. And it was mostly I was going to need to keep the last 2 Riptides alive as long as possible. In that turn, I was able to finally take out the Redemptor Dreadnought after the commanders got in range because it's extremely efficient against it. But there was a key decision I had to make. I was either going to take out the 5 intercessors that he had on the relic from the far side that was trying to get into my deployment zone for a bunch of points, or finish off the 2-wound Redemptor with a full Riptide. I ended up going for the safer play of just taking out the Redemptor, but man, I really, really wanted to kill those intercessors, because if I did, his other intercessors were so far away that they were very unlikely to get to that objective in time if the game ends on turn 5. So in that case, I would have, been a very comfortable position. But I went for the safer route, and Nick ended up killing both of my Riptides. He killed the one with the 3-up invuln, and I unfortunately failed 3 3-up invuln saves, and he did just the amount of damage he needed to. And at that point, this is his top of turn 5, and because it's Warzone format, we're not sure if the game is going to end or not at the bottom of turn 5. And so Nick had to make that decision in his movement phase, either bring his intercessors out that he had along the ruin wall in the middle and sit on the middle objective, allowing me to shoot at them and potentially kill all of them, or just wait and hope that the game goes on, because he was going to be able to outlast me due to the damage he done. And so Nick decided to play conservatively, basically 66% chance the game continues. And then going into my turn, I said, basically, I'm going to put one of my characters on the middle objective. My other character, Fireblade, on the side is going to put the relic in your deployment zone. And basically, if the game continues, I'm to lose. And so I had him roll the die there to see if the game ended. And he ended up rolling a 1. So the game ended, and I barely squeaked it out, 18-16. But it was an incredibly close game. And Nick is, easily one of the best players in the game. He's an incredible opponent, and he's an absolute gentleman to play against. And I can't wait to play him again, hopefully at Charity Hammer or Pro Tabletop.
Yeah, definitely he is one of the best players in the game. Playing against him is always an exercise in, skill and patience, because you can I've never seen someone just knock Nick out of the game easily. That's always what I've wanted to do and never been able to quite pull off. Got a couple questions for you. First things actually, when were lists submitted for Warzone Atlanta? I know we had talked about some alternative Tau builds for you, you and I personally, heading into the Atlanta Open, but it didn't look like you're playtesting that. So I'll keep whatever that was secret, I guess, since you haven't revealed it to the world yet. But when were lists submitted for this?
The lists were submitted at the same time as SoCal. So,
okay.
2 weeks before the event. And
got it.
So I didn't actually have the time post SoCal to finalize my thoughts on what I wanted to change to. But I will be running a different list for Pro Tabletop.
Okay. Yeah, and I noticed that Nick, it looked like, brought his exact same SoCal list, and again, I've spoken to him, and I know that his pro tabletop list will not be identical to that, but I'm sure we'll find out in the future what those changes may have been. Second question for you. This mission specifically, you mentioned that there were multiple relics. Was this the one where only infantry could pick up the relic?
Yep, so only infantry could pick up the relic, and they could move no more than 9 inches in a single turn.
Okay. So just on paper here, I thought that this was the worst mission for you to play, Nick. Because one, it's the relic, so objectives are all in the center. And he has all the infantry and you have really just your characters. But I guess thinking about it, since you can protect your infantry very well, you can, kind of keep them safe for the late game grab to move them late, which is what you did on turn 5. Kind of break down, how do you think the mission really affected this game? Do you think other missions you would have done better or worse? And just in general, what did you think about the Warzone Atlanta missions? You don't have to go into detail on everything, but obviously they are fairly different from ITC. And tell us how much practice you had with them.
Okay, so for the relic mission, I felt it actually going in that it was somewhat favorable to me. First of all, I got to play on Pointy Dawn. Nick actually wants longboard against me to try and delay my commanders from getting to him as much as possible. And the other thing is, he doesn't really have too many ways to interact with characters, and some of the ways are extremely expensive, like spending 3 CP on a unit of intercessors to try and snipe. So I felt like if I just outlast him and take away as much of his board presence, that he won't have enough to actually challenge me on the objectives. I just really, going in, I wanted to keep him from ever taking the middle objective. And then we could trade objectives on the sides, and as long as I controlled the middle, I could end up winning. So I wasn't too worried about the relic missions, and especially because you had to take the relics to get the most points, take the relic and bring them into your opponent's deployment zone. And that's, a very tricky feat. So I had the much safer option of having my characters take them into his deployment zone, whereas he had to use intercessor units. And Riptides and Commanders are very good against those units.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. I didn't realize that you got the points for moving into your opponent's edge, and walking intercessors into a Tau gun line, when you say it like that, sounds like literal death.
Yeah, so Nick played very cagey with his for most of the game. He hid them behind the middle ruin, always threatening to go onto the middle objective, but never quite doing it, and kind of waiting for that opportunity where he's killed most of my army. If the game had gone on to turn 6, he almost certainly would have won it by just bringing out those 13 intercessors and just sitting on it.
Okay, so makes sense.
I was a little fortunate at the end there. Now, for the Warzone missions in general, I thought they were fantastic, actually. I went in with actually very little practice with my own list on the missions, kind of like from Nova. I really didn't play any practice games with my own Tau list. Instead, I was helping my teammates Cody Saltz and Mark Perry practice their lists against Marine lists. So I was actually playing Nick's own list more than I was playing my own practice games. And so for the missions in general, I loved them. I thought, it was a lot of fun not having that kind of, like bookkeeping every single round that you have in the ITC. You just got to play 40K about the strategy of just playing the game against my opponent, not worrying about ticking these little boxes. So I found that they were very interesting, and I found overall that they really rewarded going second. Going second was huge in multiple of my games, just being able to get on the objectives towards the end of the game and being able to see whether my opponent got old school or whether they got, if they were going to be able to get line breaker, I could take them off and then get 2 points from getting my own line breaker. So I felt like, like the ITC, it does reward going second. The other change that they make is to the cover rules and how they work. Instead of having to be on or wholly on or within a terrain piece, instead, if your model is being 50% obscured from the targeting unit, you get a cover save, and your own models can block each other or obscure each other. So my drones could obscure other drones, meaning that they would get a 3-up armor save, the 4-up invuln, and their 5-up feel no pain that I could use. Or Riptides could obscure each other, giving them a 1-up save. And while that didn't come in handy too many times, simply because of the sheer amount of armor penetration in the game, it was really effective against my Orc opponent, Justin Jones, who was an absolute gentleman, but I did roll like an absolute god in that game, and I apologize. I experienced that directly.
Oh, no, don't bring it up.
One thing I was wondering, to take kind of a step back, but you'd mentioned that was your first game against Nick Nanavati, is that right?
That was my very first game against the Brown Magic himself.
Yeah. So, as a newer player, I would say his was probably one of the first names that I heard when talking about competitive 40k players. And
Me too.
Yeah, so I know at this point you've gone and won plenty of huge events, so I feel like you're kind of in that same ring, but when starting that game, first time going against Nick, was there any more of like an uncertainty or like almost like the fear aura that people talk about? Did you second guess yourself any more than normal just because you know who you were going against? Or did you feel pretty confident going in?
So I play this game because I want to play against the best players. Playing against the best players is the easiest way to improve at this game, and to really just hone your own skills. So it was an absolute treat that I got the chance to play against Nick. And at the last couple of events, we've been hanging out, getting to know each other better. And for most of Warzone, for that morning, we were actually hanging out. And then I was eating lunch, and Nick came over, and we were joking that, we'll play the next round because we both scored 33. And then he showed me the pairings, and we were actually playing. So I was actually excited. I couldn't wait to play him. I felt like that was, no disrespect to the other games that were going on, but that was a real final. Both of us on stream in a really tight tactical game. This is what I play for. I loved it.
It's a funny little story there. When we were getting ready for ATC, I've often been referred to as the Yellow Submarine because I sometimes will, not always intentionally, I try to get out of that habit and then circumstances have forced me back into it. I won't go for the big 41 point round 1 because I don't want to play Nick Nanavati round 2 is the example I have always used. And sure enough, Richard Siegler did it with style. No, I definitely appreciate that Richard has that go get him attitude where he, if we gave him the option, he would have wanted to play this, teams, 1 through 6, or he would want to play the 6 highest ranked players there just to say that he did it and just to get the experience of it. And I honestly like that. I actually was trying to get a high score in round 1 at SoCal so that I could do that, and it just didn't work out because I ran into grotesques, and that's never high scoring. But I'm trying to kick my submarining habits, and I still can't do it.
I feel like whenever I go to a tournament, I just hope to go against I don't know, maybe a stroke of luck will have me go against the 5 players that also shouldn't be in this bracket. So maybe that approach to the game definitely shows a different outcome in the results. But yeah, that's a cool attitude to have. I didn't even really think about it that way.
So to jump in, I always want to fight the best player at the event, but I want to wait till my last game to do it. So when I lose, okay, cool, I can go home. I did well today.
You have an excuse at the end. It's
yeah.
I lost, but I lost to this guy. Yeah.
But if I'm going in and it's round 2, I got Siegler. I'm okay, I'm ready for a dogfight. And then I lose, and it's well, that sucked. And then I go through and fight, and Lennon and Siegler played round 4, and Siegler gets Lennon there. Then round 5, we're both 3-1 or 4-1 depending on the event. And now I got to play Lennon, and it's well, I have 2 losses at this event. That sucks. That for me is just what I don't want to have happen. I'll take one good player at the very end of the event because I also did well. That's for me my dream. And if I win, I earned the win. And if I lost, well, I lost to Siegler or Lennon, so it's okay.
Well, looking at the list going into Warzone, I immediately was I really want to play Sean Naden. He has been at a couple of events that I've been at, but we've never had the chance to play. And I just want to play against the best. All these incredible players who've been doing it year in, year out. And that's, maybe I'm getting slightly well known, but Nick Nanavati's in a totally different realm. He's been doing it for years. He's been at the top of the game. Those are the kind of guys I really want to test my skill against.
That's actually another thing that I was, and that's just randomly comes up in my mind because I'm a person who doesn't stick with hobbies for a super long time, notorious for skipping around. But as a fairly new player to the competitive circuit and having such good success, do you have future plans to just keep going, or is there like a next season take it easy type mentality, or is it just play it as it comes and do it for as long as you enjoy it?
I am committed to making this the number one team in the ITC for the foreseeable future. But if I do end up winning LVO in the entire ITC, that is going to be really difficult to top in future years, honestly.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, because going to a bunch of different events and stuff, if it's the one thing that somebody's dedicated towards, of course, that's something that can be done every year, but working in the budget and everything, I could see it being a little difficult to do continuously, but
I am going to change the way in which and the types of events I go to next year. By and large, I'm going to go to mostly super majors, because that is really where the points are. I'll go to, local GTs, to hang out with you guys, and to get some prize support. But by and large, I'm going to be saving as much money as possible to go to pretty much all the super majors next year. I hope to travel to LGT. That would be awesome. Just experience different metas. And I think that's largely the future for 40K is these super majors. That's where the scores are.
I'm actually on the same page as Richard, even if I'm not quite at his level of success. I'm trying to get that super major win that he seems to be racking up. But I'm probably going to be dropping out of, not dropping out, but not attending as many of the local 32 40-man GTs. Basically anything that I have to go to a hotel for, unless it's going to be one of those super majors. I really would like to end up at LGT next year and Adepticon. Those are the two that I kind of missed this year. And then maybe a couple years down the road, obviously ETC would be a goal. But I'm sure pretty much anyone in 40K would want to go to ETC if they had the opportunity. With that being said, I'm going to segue a little bit into our next topic. So you kind of talked about it on chapter tactics, aura maintenance, pre-measuring, talking about intent and moving. I think all of these are kind of hallmarks of the great players, and I think they're one of those things that's harder to master because it's very easy to slip up and get lazy and make mistakes on it. This is me getting on a soapbox here. I think Gene Stealer Cult is one of the harder armies to play because not only is there so much movement and models involved, but because there are so many different characters with so many different auras that stack in different ways with the unit rules, and you kind of have to try to get all of them working all at the same time in order to get the most effect out of your units. And if you fail to do that, don't finish off an enemy, it can be the end of the game because of your own tissue paper nature. I think that playing Gene Stealer Cult has kind of made me a pretty good aura player. However, I played a practice game with Tau a couple months ago just to see what I could do with a completely different army. And Tau is a completely different beast. Tau is hard to play. Let's go ahead and start off with that. Taking away melee and psychic powers does not make the army easy. It makes it hard. But Tau kind of have a different type of setup because you have to plan it out a little more. I think you have to plan it out a little farther in advance. I'll wait and see if Siegler agrees with me. Gene Stealer Cult, I kind of got to take a really relaxed turn 1 and then do all my planning turn 2. Tau is very, very deployment. Deployment is obviously crucial for every army, but Tau, more so than any Imperial army or Gene Stealer Cult or Tyranid army that I've played, it feels like Tau is the most important as far as pre-measuring during deployment went.
I would absolutely agree with that. Deployment, like I say in chapter tactics, is absolutely crucial. It sets you up for the entire game, and you have to be thinking about a whole bunch of different things at once, some of which are the aura abilities. So Tau have incredibly powerful aura abilities. So they have Monka or Kalyun, which is a 6-inch aura around one of the commanders. They have the Ethereal Aura for the 6-up Feel No Pain or reroll ones to hit. They have For the Greater Good. Every model within 6 can Supporting Fire on Overwatch. They have Savior Protocols, which is a 3-inch range from your drones. And you need all of those. And they start in deployment. And then after that, you need to be thinking, where exactly are they going to be turn 1? Where are they going to be turn 2? You basically have to have a game plan for the entire game. You need to be able to see where this game is going to go. And if you don't, it's very easy to mess up. And as soon as Tau mess up, you start losing Riptides like I did against Nick. I made the mistake of not realizing that I had like 8 shield drones still in that ruin. And that ended up costing me a Riptide in my second turn. So, even the best of us can make mistakes. And they are, very easy to punish. In addition to that, you need to be thinking about your angles, your shooting angles. You need to be planning where exactly are these Riptides going to be, have vision to, and what are they going to be shooting. Oftentimes, you're going to need to be setting up multiple shooting targets. So, do I want to put the SMS into the scouts or eliminators? I need to have 30-inch range to them. Am I going to put this 36-inch burst cannon into a unit of suppressors? I have to have 36-inch range to them. You have to be planning out where exactly you're going to shoot and what angles you're going to take. And in order to do that effectively, you also need to think about where your opponent is going to position his arm. Okay? Is he going to come in from deep strike on the shortboard side, like Nick ended up doing? He could have come out on the other side of my backfield. What ranges does your opponent have access to? How fast do their units move? You need to basically understand your opponent's army and its own ranges to effectively have a game plan. So in addition to that, pre-measuring is crucial. So for all my aura abilities, especially Savior Protocols, which is honestly the most important one, because it ensures that your army actually survives, I almost always measure the minimum distance of how far my drones would move within advance. Because if they do not get within 3 inches of a Riptide, you have massively messed up, especially if you're running the larger drone squads, say like 8 to 12 drones in the big tactical units. So I am always putting dice out all over the board, and you'll see this on stream, where I'm pre-measuring exactly where the drones need to be in order to ensure that Riptides are within 3 inches. That's the very first thing I do before I even start moving anything. I'll often declare Monka and then start placing dice to determine where exactly I'm going to go with the Riptides and the drones. My first turn may take, like 10, 15 minutes just in the movement phase, but this is setting you up for the entire game, and it's worth taking that time. And it's always why I use a chess clock as well. It's not simply to ensure I play the 6 turns, but to ensure that I'm spending enough time on those movement phases, which are the crucial phase for Tau, even more than the shooting phase.
Okay. Definitely. I noticed that especially in our Crucible game. I noticed that I think you spent about 8 minutes measuring and putting down dice, and then 2 minutes putting down models once we had actually talked about what exactly where everything was going to go. So there's, the running joke, if you watch my stream at SoCal, is that I understand. Because I like to talk about intent a lot. This was absolutely something that got into me with Gene Cult, because when I was deep striking units one at a time, I'd be putting down a character and then I'd be measuring out and saying, okay, this one guy in the squad is within 6 inches. And just so you know, this one guy is not going to move after I charge and pile and consolidate. This one guy is going to stay right here. And then he'd get bumped as I deep strike 17 other units around him, and he'd be 6.1 inches away, and I'd be like, okay, we remembered me talking about this guy being here and not moving, right? Right. Okay. I bump him back to where he was supposed to be. We move on with the game. That's definitely not something that I was good at first. I honestly, when I was younger, which is weird to say since I'm already the youngest person on this podcast, when I was a teenager, I would be very hard set on, nope, you did this wrong, too late to go back. I didn't really play by intent, and the game's not very pleasant that way. And once you get that teenage angst out of your system and realize that both people should be having fun, you definitely realize that talking to people is just much better. So that's something that I always try to do. I always talk out ranges before I move any models. I'll normally measure like total distance between a unit. So I'll say, all right, my aberrants are, 17 inches away from your Centurions. If I move 6 and advance D6 and add 2 for Twisted Helix, I'm now X inches away when I declare my charge. And sometimes I'll just take 2 dice and put that number next to them after I move. So we remember, hey, there's a 2 and a 5 next to this unit. They have a 7-inch charge. Those kind of things that you talk about in the movement, it really saves you time, honestly, because you never have to measure twice at that point. You take those first initial, you take those couple minutes at the beginning of your turn and during your movement phase to talk about exactly where everything's going and what is going to be happening. That means you don't have to go back and measure it in the shooting phase when you're saying like, oh, do I need to not kill anyone so I have this range charge? And then in the charge range, you go back and measure again because your opponent didn't look the first time. So now I have to go back and see exactly what you need to roll the charge. And then there's no arguing over little, half inches or millimeters or whatever the case may be. And that, in my opinion, makes the game a little more enjoyable because you take away the moments where you and your opponent have different expectations. Because if you and your opponent expect different things from a situation, one of you inherently is going to be wrong. You cannot both be right if you think different things. And then, whoever was wrong is frustrated. I thought I had a 10-inch charge and now you're telling me, that I have an 11-inch charge. Well, oh no, I rolled a 10. What do I do now? So just those kind of situations in general, I think are best to avoid. But most of my experience with pre-measuring has come with movement and melee. I've been playing Gene Stealer Cult and, for probably most of my high level competitive play has been with Gene Stealer Cult, and I played Custodes for a little bit, but I moved 60 inches and my guns were 60-inch range, and I just kind of laughed and rolled 2 ups all the time, and it was fun. There was no real skill or measuring going on with that, honestly. I just kind of moved golden models and rolled dice at people. Shooting, however, requires a little bit different kind of pre-measuring, and especially playing head. And I've started to notice that with my Space Marine army, which, no, Space Marines are not as difficult to play as either Gene Stealer Cult or Tau. I'm not going to lie to you guys. But because my army has a heavy assault element, it feels like home to me. But then it also has more guns than my Gene Stealer Cult, so I'm kind of getting back into a phase that I previously didn't do much with. Specifically, shooting my 24-inch guns has been the interesting part of the equation. For you, Richard, when you're moving your models to shoot, how often do you, I'm assuming often, kind of describe your thought process, how you think about whether your opponent's going to be moving out of your range band or getting closer to you? Because one of the things I see is that people will sometimes have a 36-inch range gun and they'll move too close, and then, they're in range to shoot easily, but then they're in range for inevitable counter charges. But on the flip side is sometimes I see someone put like a dreadnought with 6-inch move. I see them put something 47.5 inches away and they shoot it and it lives, and then it backs up 8 inches and then they just can't move and shoot it at all. How do you try to balance that as a top player?
Sure. So I'll actually give you an example from this past weekend. So it was round 4 and I was playing against my friend, Bobby Birmingham, and he was playing Ultramarines with several dreadnoughts, including a Leviathan. And the Leviathan with double storm cannon is genuinely scary. I do not want that thing shooting at my drones, because it will pick up quite a few of them. And so what Bobby did very cleverly is he deployed outside of my Cal Yun range, so that I was always going to have to move turn 1, and I wouldn't get those full rerolls to hit. So what I did, knowing that, is I used Monka to then avoid his Leviathan for a full turn. I moved exactly 32.1 inches away so that he wouldn't be able to shoot anything from my army besides a Pathfinder unit, which happy to give up. So I'm always thinking not only about my own ranges, but also what are the most dangerous units in my opponent's army, and what are they dangerous against. So Leviathan is a amazing drone killer. I was going to keep my drones away from that as long as possible, but I was forced to shoot it. The second thing is, because it has short range, I know I can avoid it for that first turn, and then the second turn, once it's that much closer, I can then put the commanders into it if I need to. Or I could simply play KG for an extra turn, bringing it even closer to me. And that's what I ended up doing, is just let it come all the way up to me, and then I unleash the commanders on it. You need to be thinking about both your own ranges and your opponent's ranges. I do a ton of pre-measuring for my opponent's ranges as well.
Pre-measuring opponent's range has always been something I've done as a Gene Circle player because, the two ways to hide are line of sight and range. Well, the third is being wrapped in combat, of course, but, I try to do that as often as possible. But for measuring, measuring your opponent's range has always been very interesting for me. As a Marine player, having the short range firepower like Hurricane Bolters on my Centurions, Intercessors, those Dreadnoughts, those style units, it's definitely been interesting trying to take that gamble of, all right, do I want to shoot them, but also am I getting shot back? Just because that's kind of a new dynamic for me that with Gene Circle, there was no choice. It was, I don't have any guns in my army that are better than my opponent's guns, so I'm going to choose to not be in line of sight at every possible opportunity. That's very simple. Space Marines has made that a little interesting. And then Tau, while you have indirect fire, you definitely need to, you obviously need to get the burst cannons shooting when you can, as long as it's not at the risk of the overall game. I don't actually know where I'm going with that point.
Well,
I lost it. I'm sorry, guys.
I'll pick it up for you. So with the short ranges, I have 3 of my key units are the Cyclic Ion Commanders with 18-inch range. And if they go uncounted for an entire game, they will pick up over half your opponent's army, quite easily, in fact. What exactly do I do with that short range? Because they're not going to be shooting every turn, simply due to that limitation. And you just have to be, I've grown comfortable with playing this list, but when you play it, you have to be comfortable not shooting for a turn. You can use that turn to simply reposition to be in, the dangerous threat range the following turn. And this is one of the reasons why I very rarely ever deep strike those commanders. I almost always leave them on the board, and use them as, threats. If my opponent needs to get on these midfield objectives, guess what? The commanders are immediately going to be in range. If my opponent needs to get a recon point, my commanders are there to kill the thing in my quarter, while the Riptides can focus on things farther away. So it's trying to use those ranges to your advantage as much as possible. The second thing I'll say, going back to your point about intent, is that, and I think this is similar for a lot of the top players, is that we want to win because we outplayed our opponent. Because our strategy and tactics and decision making were the difference in the game. We were just better on that day in those factors, rather than my opponent forgot to fire and fade his Dark Reapers, and I just easily picked them up on my turn. So I tend to play this game as a gentleman's game. I played it very relaxed, and I always talk to my opponents before the game and say, hey, I don't mind if things are slightly out of timing, or if, we declare something, but you forgot a little thing. We'll go ahead and do that. No problem. So I'll give you an example. In my first round, I was playing against a really great gentleman called Wayne Birch, and he loaded up his Dark Reapers with a bunch of buffs, shot his whole army, and then we continued on. The Dark Reapers actually never shot, and we didn't realize until it was ready. We had done the morale phase, and we had started going into my turn. And then Wayne was like, oh my God, I forgot to shoot those Dark Reapers. I was like, fine, yeah, go ahead. Tap it back to you. We're going to do the Dark Reaper shooting now. No big deal. Okay. I don't want to win because my opponent forgot to shoot the one critical unit in his, the most critical unit in his army. Playing the game as a game, not taking it too seriously, and treating your opponent with respect, because everybody forgets things. Everybody can, misremember something or make a slight mistake, or forget the timing of a very specific stratagem. And if you kind of take away that pressure, you tend to have really, really relaxed games, even in big finals. So the other example is my final against Nick Rose, the Nova final. We were playing a very, relaxed, casual game. I actually made a mistake in choosing secondaries, and Nick allowed me to choose a different secondary in, the end of the first round or start of the second round, which was an incredible move by him, really generous. And, that paid off for him because later in the game, he actually forgot his psychic phase twice. And we were in, shooting or assault. And I was like, go ahead, man, go ahead and cast those smites or whatever powers he needed. And, that's kind of the ideal of competitive 40K for me is, just playing the game the best we can, helping your opponent to play his best game, and winning with that challenge.
Okay. You actually were right on point with your initial statement, and you perfectly completed my thought. But I did have a little bit more I'm going to add before I forget it, and then before I work right back to the end of that. So, rewinding a little bit here, the short range on the commanders is actually where I was going with the pre-measuring. Because they have a short range of 18 inches, but as I recall, the commander moves 10 inches, and then their assault weapons, so advancing and shooting is an option, right?
8 inches. So their max threat range with a 6 on the advance is 32.
32. Okay. How often do you use, and I know I'm rewinding a little bit here, how often do you use that 32 inch threat range kind of as the deterrent? And sometimes it's not just trying to trick your opponent into getting his range, it's sometimes making it very clear that it's an option and using that to keep him out of something. So sure, you may not roll a 6, but something that I'll sometimes do with melee units is I'll emphasize, to my opponent, like, okay, the farthest an aberrant unit can charge is 26 inches. If you're more than 26 inches away, I won't charge you. I think it's actually 28 inches for Twisted Helix aberrants. And I'll kind of watch them put down the dice at 28 inches away from my aberrants and watch them play around that. And then the aberrants stay where they are and they don't get in combat and they don't do anything that game. But now I have made my opponent do, move around my wishes. The commanders, even if they're not firing a shot, absolutely can, and against me have had the same impact, where I'm not quite willing to go step inside of a certain range band, and I'm trying to outshoot you from the middle to long distance. How often do you use that to your benefit?
Quite often, actually. So I always tell my opponent, these are their assault weapons, their max threat range is this. And it actually came up in my game against Nick Nanavati. He had the difficult decision of where exactly to place his drop pod and the grab devs, the sniper scouts, because he had 2 characters along his back edge from the turn 1. I killed the Thunderfire Cannon and I killed the intercessors who were protecting the captain and the Tegmer. Started advancing them down his side of the board. Protect those characters for as long as possible. Or does he play more conservatively with it? And one of the factors in that was these commanders can, advance and potentially pick up all of that, allowing the Riptides to then kill, pretty much all. And the other thing that went into that is Nick knows I like to assault with my shield drones and Riptides. And if he put the drop pod too close, I could have potentially wrapped the drop pod with all my drones and made it basically impossible for him to win the game. So he had to play actually quite a bit more conservatively and basically sacrifice 2 characters because they were already in the commander. So it forces your opponent to really make some difficult choices. And it keeps them sharp. If they want to know any of the rules, or any max threat ranges, I immediately tell them, and I often do so pre-game. So just having that in the back of your opponent's mind can make them play a little differently than they normally would.
Okay. That's explanation of what your thought process is there. So now going back to it, I actually want to touch on, you mentioned a lot how, important sportsmanship is to you. It's worth noting that you not only had the most battle points for the Warzone Atlanta, you also won best overall. Do you happen to know where you fell on the painting and sportsmanship ranking? Obviously, in in-game points, you did finish first. Do you happen to know where you fell in the other 2?
So for painting, I got a max score. Then for sportsmanship, I got 26 out of the 33 points. So I had 3 favorite opponent votes, and I think 2 that were, I was the second favorite opponent, something like that. And this was actually the second best overall I've won in a row, because at SoCal I had the fortune of winning the Renaissance Man as well. So, this is really like the goal. I really wanted to win best overall going in, and so I had been, adding, highlighting to different units, I try to have a really nice looking army, and then sportsmanship is incredibly important for me. One of the big reasons to go to these events is to meet all of these new people who have similar interests to me. I've made a ton of new friends this year, and I can't wait.
Okay. That's obviously fantastic to hear. Congratulations on a perfect sportsmanship score, as well as being number 1 in battle points. And then hearing you get a perfect painting score, hearing that you got a good sportsmanship score is obviously not surprising in the least, because I've seen you play and played against you, and you are always a gentleman. An interesting side note there is that last year I went to Warzone Atlanta. This year couldn't make it due to work. Last year I did not get a very good sportsmanship score. And that was a little bit sobering for me. So in 5 games played, I got 1 favorite opponent vote and 0 second favorite opponent votes. And I know for a fact that the best opponent vote I got was from one of my teammates. So while, yeah, it's better than not getting it, it doesn't really make me feel much better. So kind of an interesting, and this is off of the path that we had set beforehand. I don't think that I'm a bad sport. I don't think that I'm an unpleasant opponent. I think that I just get a little bit laser focused, and maybe even if I'm not making my opponent miserable, I'm not going out of my way to try to make it more enjoyable for them. And I'm trying to work on that, but that's a little, when I get in the moment, especially if it's a relatively competitive, buckle down, get in my own head and don't leave. And I'm just staring at the board and making my moves and only talking intent, but not talking much outside of that. This is on the spot. What would you say the difference is between being not a bad opponent, which I'll pretend that is where I am, and being a good opponent?
I think one of the key differences, and this came up a couple of times, is just trying to, even if the game is going really one-sided in your favor, is to make it interesting and fun with the little things that your opponent can do to make it a game. And I have a couple examples of this from Warzone. In the first round, Wayne Birch and I had actually played at ATC, and it was kind of a brutal game where I killed most of his army on Overwatch. And so this time he played a very different style. It was also a different list. But we had, kind of little games of how many drones is he killing? How many invulns is he going to make? He actually made something like 18 to 22 up invulns on his Archon against my cyclic ion commanders, which, although a little frustrating for me, was actually a lot of fun because it made the game much closer. And so kind of just like encouraging your opponent, just, having a great time. Against Nick, he was buying me waters, I was buying him drinks. Later on against Justin, where I was rolling incredibly hot on my drone saves, we were still having a lot of fun. In fact, he had a unit of flash gits and re-rolled a 1 to see if they could double shoot into a 6, which once again was kind of brutal, but also a lot of fun just seeing the craziness of orcs. And so, you can have these little fun things that are going on in your games. And in my last game, I actually seized on my Chaos Knight opponent and proceeded to kill one of the knights. The second turn, I killed another one, which can be kind of dejecting. But he still had a whole bunch of, splitting Chaos Demons, and we were kind of playing around with how he could potentially get as many of the objectives as possible. And he almost achieved it. I just had a little too much firepower, but there was a turn where he could have gotten, 10 to 12 points, just on that primary, and made it a really, really tight, close game. And one of the other things I do is I like to just sit with my opponent afterwards, and usually they ask me, what could I have done better? What kinds of things could I do with my gameplay? And so just, kind of sitting down, having a chat, just talking strategy, talking about, their list, the different things that you really like about their list that was unique, the way in which they played. My last opponent, Mac, who was a literal gentleman and a scholar, he was really smart in how he deployed his knights. He immediately sacrificed that thermal cannon knight He knew I was going to get in range of one of them, and he made the double thermal one the easiest by far to get in range of. And that's the one I want to kill last. But he didn't allow me to do that. So I, was highlighted how that was such a great play. And that in deployment, he was already thinking about how my army could attack. In my game against Justin Jones, he had a moment where he could have wrapped 20 Gretchen around a Fireblade, after making a 12-inch charge. But, he did end up wrapping him on the ground, but I had cleverly positioned him, to be below a second level. And so kind of, Justin knew he made a little mistake there, but we kind of talked about it because he had that extra movement. He could have moved up just one grot up there and made it impossible for me to do that. And just talking about little strategy moments like that. Opponents seem to really enjoy that.
Yeah. And just to step back a moment as well, you mentioned that you got Renaissance Man at SoCal?
I did.
Yeah, nice. I know I saw recently for anybody who might not know, one of our Brohammer guys, Lee, makes battle boards, like display boards. Mm-hmm. And I know he had made one for you in like the winter theme. Did you have that at SoCal?
No, I didn't have that at SoCal, but I did have it at Warzone Atlanta.
Nice. And was that received pretty well? I know it looked pretty cool in the pictures that he'd posted.
It looks great. Perfectly matches my army, even though he didn't have access to the army to kind of visualize the basing. But if you're looking for a display board, really high quality, definitely check out Battleboard Studios. Lee Harris, really great guy.
Yeah. Whenever you got the Renaissance Man, did you have like a display board at all at the time? Or was it just based on like the painting scores? And
it was based on Frontline Gaming's own painting rubric for their hobby track. And for Renaissance Man, it's the combination of their battle score, sportsmanship, and the painting. And out of the top players at SoCal, aside from Brian Pullen, who won the event, I pretty much had the best looking army. And then I feel like all my opponents had really enjoyable games. So I think, Reese and Frankie probably went around and asked. And so I guess that's how I ended up winning it. But it was an absolute pleasure to play there. Those guys put on fantastic tournaments. And I really hope to go to BAO and SoCal again next year.
All right. I think that wrapped up most of what I had planned to say. Jimmy, Daniel, I don't know. Do you guys have any more questions for good old Richard while we have him?
I think I'm sorry, that was weird. I think I'm pretty good. I haven't said anything for I wasn't ready to talk. No, I think honestly, you guys pretty much covered everything. I just want to say again, congratulations. And honestly, when we created Team Brohammer, the entire purpose was for sportsmanship, and we want to be the type of guys where you're looking forward to playing us because it'll be a good game, and afterward we can go grab a beer together, hang out. And so that's one of my favorite things is our guys that are at the top. Siegler's obviously winning the being a bro award at these events, and Lennon, I know you said you're working on your bedside manner, getting better at that.
Bedside manner as he slowly kills his opponent.
So that's something, a big emphasis for me in the competitive hobby is still being a good person and someone that people look forward to playing. So I don't have much of where I'm going with this other than just being on a high horse, but I look forward to more events and more people, as hopefully, because I to back up a little bit, I know that there has been a stigma of competitive gamers are power gaming buttholes, who they do everything they can to win at all costs, whack players. There's all these bad names for competitive gamers, and I really like the guys who not only play the game well but are good about it. I don't know what else to say, or how else to say it rather, but so so honestly, like that's my favorite thing, is not just that you're having success, Siegler, but in the way that you're having success and encouraging more people to play the same.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I mean, I've played maybe about 100 tournament games this season, and I have yet to have an unpleasant game. By and large, this community has excellent people playing the game. You know, just superb gentlemen who are just playing it because they love this game. They want to go out, they want to meet new people, they want to test their skill. And so, you know, when you hear about these, you know, power gaming buttholes, very far, few and far between. There are very few in the community.
Yeah.
All right. I'll wrap it up by giving a general shout out to Team Brohammer. Obviously, Siegler stole the headlines by winning the event, but I think we should shout out. Let's see, who was there? John Moore, Mark Perry, Bretton Weiss, Cody Saltz. Was that? There was 6 of you guys, I thought.
It's always dangerous doing a shout out like that by name,
because I know.
you will always forget someone and you will feel terrible. But yes, shout out to all of our bros. Everyone that went from Brohammer was positive. We didn't have a single losing record there, which is just awesome. So shout out to everyone, and of course Siegler being the man, the myth, and the legend. But yeah, all of our guys did great, and that's always exciting. I enjoy seeing our level of competition continue to grow and get better, and it's because we have access to both of you guys, actually, Lennon and Siegler, that we get to play against and really have to grind against. If I want to win a freaking RTT, I got to beat one of you guys. Like, the GTs are easier because I have less chance of running into you than a freaking 12-man RTT. It's crazy, but it's good because it helps get us all of us better. So, and I know that's something you talked about a little bit on Chapter Tactics too, Siegler, was just having such a great community down here, so many great people to play against. We're spoiled, honestly.
Florida meta, no joke. It is incredibly potent.
That's why we go after the Florida map. All right, well, I'm going to stop patting us on the back, but you guys can keep going if you want. That's all I had for tonight. Richard, you don't have anything of your own, anything to plug that I'm aware of. You were on Art of War recently, a couple months ago. You were on Chapter Tactics just earlier this week. Anything else that you want to say? Other than that, we should look forward to Charity Hammer.
You can look forward to next year. I will be sponsored by Team Obey Alliance, an esports team who is trying to get into tabletop gaming. And Mark Perry and I will be providing competitive 40K content on a regular basis. So look forward to that.
Whew, extra spicy. I love it. All right. I think that's all we have then. So we are going to be talking next week probably about ITC secondaries and probably recapping the Coastal Assault GT in Pensacola. And Richard, you will not be there, right?
I will not be there.
Okay.
I have a bunch of other things I need to take care of.
That makes sense. Life happens like that.
Yep. And it's just a little GT. It's not big enough to affect the score, right?
Oh, it's not.
Dan and
Just
I
a little GT. Let one of us
relief.
let one of us lower life forms win it.
Oh.
And
I don't know. I
there's-
think I gotta adopt Siegler's mentality of the whole, fight the best to be the best.
Oh, absolutely. And I will gladly fight the best.
Siegler, I'm just gonna show up at your house. I'm just gonna be like, fight me.
We've only played once, but
I know.
It was kind of a brutal game.
It was awful. It was no. Well, let me not say that the game itself was awful, but the game itself was
hurt a little
awful.
bit.
No, it was the Taunar versus
Taunar against Knights.
my 6-night list. 3 knights went down in one turn. It was turn 2. And we were also, I was hammering anvil, so I was churning across a board of heavy fire. But yeah.
Oh, no.
That was the first
That's
time
fair.
I had never even heard of Siegler, and I show up and I'm like, oh, there's a big-ass robot across the table. And then I got obliterated.
Yeah. I remember Jimmy walking up to me, literally, I think I was still deploying, and Jimmy just walks up to me shaking his head.
And the rest of my body. Just
What happened?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to cut off our ramblings as much as I love listening to you guys. I think that's all we got.
That's my favorite part, though.
All right. Well, thank you
Rampart.
guys, and thank you, Siegler, for being a part of the podcast today.
Yeah, and remember
Thanks for having me
to.
on.
Sorry, I jumped in. I'm so rude.
That's all right. We'll just cut your audio.
I'm crushing this whole thing. I love you,
All right.
Siegler.
Cheers. Thanks for
All right,
having me on, guys.
Are on YouTube, iTunes, the various podcasting sites that you know and love and hold so dear. Please subscribe, like, do whatever the YouTubers say you should do. Comment, perhaps. If you send us messages, we will absolutely answer them. I hope you enjoy and give any feedback you want, negative or positive. We are happy to hear it. That's all from me.
Goodbye.
See ya.